divine rescue. Prior to coming to Church on the Rock, I was actually fortunate enough to get born again. However, even though I was born again and I was trying to make those changes, I was still drinking, I was still smoking, still listening to heavy metal music. I was in a heavy metal band for years, and I wanted to live that rock and roll lifestyle. But it had worn me down to the point where I hated life. It was just so much stress of trying to live a life that was really a lie. But I just wanted that success. But it brought me to a point where I knew I needed Christ, and I gave my life to Jesus. And I got myself in a church, but it didn't give me what I needed, because every time a new sermon was presented, there was still 100 more questions that I had, and I never got the answers to. And I could feel myself drifting. And I was invited to hear a CD from Dr. Dennis Hadaball. And it was about, what would your coworkers say if I asked them if you were a Christian? And at the time, I was trying to be, people had seen some kind of change in me, but not enough that I could live what Jesus really said we were supposed to. And that really hit me. That CD series really, that CD particular hit me, because it got me thinking, what would the people around me say? And so I came to church, and I had watched Pastor Dennis, and just total ignorance on my part, I thought he was the most arrogant man I'd ever seen in my life. He was preaching, but he was preaching with such conviction, such determination, but I didn't know what that was. It just seemed arrogant, but I didn't. It was later on that I realized. And in that, he just that one time that I showed up in person, he started showing us things. I don't remember the exact thing, but he started showing us things, and I'd never heard it before. And it was like, oh, that makes sense. And we're reading it right there. We're in the Word of God, and we're looking at it, and I'm like, why hasn't anybody ever told me this? Why hasn't anybody ever said anything like this? And so as I started giving and yielding myself to it, the things started dropping out of my life. And I started realizing that there were more answers. There were more things that I needed to hear. But to get back to when I was talking about Pastor Dennis, about being arrogant or whatever, I actually had the privilege, maybe a week or two later, I had been coming to service, and he had actually come to Walmart where I was working at the time. And Brother David, who got me to come to church, he said, hey, I want you to meet Pastor Dennis. And I said, okay. So I went to meet him, and it was the most genuine love of God, and I didn't know it at the time. But when I shook his hand, he was the most genuine person I had ever met. And so some other things started clicking, and it was just so easy to follow him as my man of God. And as I've started learning, it was easy for me to commit and be covenant to Pastor Angie and Pastor Dennis, to see how much they've laid down their lives. And now, after almost 11 years of all the things that my family and I and myself personally have been, just the blessings, the rescues, and the things that we've had in our life, I would not be here. My family would not be here without Pastor Dennis and Pastor Angie giving up their life and giving me the divine rescue which is the sacrifice of their life. I've had the privilege of having personal conversations with Pastor Dennis over many years. I've had, all my life, I've always struggled with weight. So much so that as I was younger, I was unmercifully bullied, and that contributed a lot of my angst and the animosity that I had towards people and just in general. But he would take me aside and say, you know, we can do some things, we can work on some things, and I was reluctant, not reluctant because of what he was saying, but just because it required such a mind change. It required such an internal part of me that knew that I had given up smoking, I had given up drinking, but food was trying to kill me. The devil knew that the way to get to me was that part of that appetite of my life. Because it was so ingrained growing up that, you know, everything we did was eat. So it was so natural to me to try to be like an ostrich and put my head in the sand and pretend it didn't exist. But Pastor had a health conference in March, and there was things that clicked, and there was things I needed to hear, because there was some things coming up in my health that I needed to deal with that I had been putting off and putting off and putting off. And had I not dealt with the weight situation then, I would not be here today. But I was able to renew my mind and really strap down and focus and listen to the things and really get on the other side of some mental roadblocks about food and how food was trying to control my life. Because I used to obsess about food all the time. You know, what am I going to eat for lunch? What am I going to eat for breakfast? What am I going to eat for... And, you know, I'd go to bed thinking about what I was going to eat the next day. And it was, you don't realize what a compulsion or what an obsession it is until you're delivered from it. And then all of a sudden you recognize that's a thought. And then what do you do with that thought? And 2 years afterwards of being able to be delivered, that I'm still working on things, and I'm still working things through, but I'm 170 pounds less than I was, which is a whole person. But it also, there was some things that I had to deal with leg. I had to have surgery in my legs because I had serious venous problems, which resulted in a severe blood infection, which caused blood clots to get in my lungs. And as they did the tests throughout my body, because I had lost the weight and because I had taken preventative measures, they had calculated, or they had done all the tests on my oxygen levels, my blood pressure, and they said all of that was the statistics of a teenager. But they also told me, had I not lost the weight, the chances of me surviving those blood clots, because they were so numerous, the chances of me surviving were very slim, because my body would not have been able to fight them off. And there would have been also a good chance, had I been as heavy and had the infections that I had in my legs, I would have lost both of my legs. So there has been many divine rescues, and that me personally, that has been one that I do know that I would not be here today had I not heeded and taken the love that pastors have for myself and my family, and not taken it and done something with it. My name is Nash, Godsey, and my family and I are disciples